you may not know about is the clash of cultures that occurred in the 12th century.
Henry makes clear that Mary will surrender, not on her terms, but his.
In a distant historical period, there thrived an age characterized by lavishness, fascination, and peril. It was an era defined by monarchy, grandeur, and chaos, an age in which even a single misstep could cost you your head.
It says, "And if a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing."
It is the Tudor Era, a segment of history filled with remarkable complexity that surpasses even your most imaginative expectations. In this groundbreaking exploration, we aim to challenge your contemporary perspectives and uncover an age where daily survival was a constant battle. Join us as we explore concealed realities and shed light on some of the challenges that would make survival in Tudor England a formidable endeavor. The Tudor Era's portrait-perfect marital mishap. The dating world can often be a challenging endeavor, as much today as it was in the past. While contemporary dating apps present their own unique set of complexities, there's always the unrelenting pressure to measure up to the carefully curated images we project on social media. To offer a historical perspective, let's journey back to a time when social media meant something quite different. In the Tudor era, before the advent of the internet, their version of social media was akin to a painted portrait. Imagine the predicament of setting up your friend on a date solely based on a portrait and the dire consequences that can unfold from such an arrangement. This scenario unfolds in the fascinating tale of King Henry VIII and his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. In the annals of history, by the time of the demise of Henry VIII's third wife, Jane Seymour, in childbirth, Thomas Cromwell had remarkably ascended from being the humble son of a blacksmith to become the chief minister of Henry VIII and one of the most influential figures in the kingdom. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. Cromwell was entrusted with the momentous task of finding a new spouse for the monarch. In 1539, Cromwell orchestrated a matrimonial union between Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves, a German princess hailing from the Duchy of Cleves. This union was primarily a political move, devised to ally with the Protestant states in Germany. The objective was to counterbalance the growing power of the Catholic Habsburg dynasty amid the simmering Catholic-Protestant tensions of the era. Cromwell had heavily relied on the portraits of Anne of Cleves, which were painted by Henry VIII's court painter. However, when Anne arrived in England and Henry laid eyes on her in person, the king was sorely disappointed. He found Anne's appearance to be far from the flattering depiction in the portraits and was unimpressed, remarking that she bore no resemblance to the woman he had been shown. Henry went as far as expressing his displeasure, stating that he saw nothing appealing in her, much to the consternation of those around him. Henry VIII, notorious for his multiple marriages and his perpetual quest for beautiful consorts, soon grew disillusioned with Anne. He vehemently rejected any consummation of the marriage. Curiously, there were contrasting accounts of Anne's actual appearance, with some asserting that she wasn't notably different from her portrait. Instead, it was alleged that Henry was impotent, unable to perform in the bedroom. Regardless of the underlying reasons for Henry's disappointment, it didn't take long before he turned his ire toward Cromwell for orchestrating the marriage. The king accused Cromwell of deceiving him by presenting a portrait that failed to reflect Anne's actual appearance. Cromwell's fall from grace commenced shortly after the ill-fated marriage, and he soon faced grave charges of treason and heresy. In a tragic turn of events, he was executed on the 28th of July in the year 1540. The accounts of his execution are varied and shrouded in uncertainty. Some conjecture that Cromwell's enemies conspired to bring an inept executioner to botch the beheading. While there is no concrete evidence to confirm or refute this theory, it remains a topic of historical debate. Reports on the swiftness and brutality of the beheading also differ, with some asserting that it was a swift, clean blow, while others claim that it took several attempts. As for the unfortunate portrait painter Hans Holbein the Younger, he managed to escape unscathed from the political turmoil. This fortunate outcome perhaps hints at the possibility that Henry's dissatisfaction with Anne might have been more rooted in his issues, such as impotence or a political maneuver to rid himself of a once trusted advisor. In any case, Holbein was spared from the grim fate that befell Cromwell. The intricate historical backdrop of these events is marked by political intricacies and religious tensions. Cromwell was an unwavering Protestant in a court rife with individuals who harbored animosity towards his faith. His steadfast adherence to Protestantism likely contributed to the hostility directed at him. Henry VIII's reign of execution and the Treason Act of 1534. Over the years, King Henry VII may have displayed a greater enthusiasm for executing individuals than he did for savoring his meals. His inclination for beheadings reached an extraordinary zenith due to a legislative development known as the Treason Act of 1534. This act effectively transformed Tudor England into a realm reminiscent of George Orwell's dystopian vision, where even mere thoughts against the monarchy could lead to severe repercussions. In the following narrative, we will delve into the circumstances surrounding the enactment of this significant statute, tracing it back to the moment when Henry severed ties with the Roman Catholic Church to establish the Church of England. The separation from the Roman Catholic Church was primarily motivated by King Henry's desire to obtain a divorce, a request deemed unattainable within the confines of Catholic doctrine. Consequently, he undertook a pivotal move to position himself as the supreme authority of the English Church. This decision aimed to not only consolidate his political power, but also assert his dominion over religious affairs. The schism with Rome was driven by a confluence of personal, political, and religious factors, including his yearning for a male heir, disputes with the Pope, and a growing fascination with Protestant ideologies. To solidify his status as the head of the English Church, King Henry enacted the Treason Act of 1534. This statute criminalized the denial of Henry's ecclesiastical supremacy, the expression of harm towards the monarch, or the mere insinuation that he was either a heretic or a tyrant. Its core purpose was to suppress dissent and ensure unwavering loyalty to the crown. The Treason Act of 1534 had a profound, chilling effect on public discourse within England, compelling individuals to exercise great caution in their public proclamations or writings about the monarch, under the imminent threat of being accused of treason and facing grave consequences. To truly appreciate the gravity of this legislation, one must ponder the immense self-restraint required of individuals who, despite their negative sentiments, were compelled to withhold criticisms and condemnations of Henry VIII. The Treason Act not only constrained the public's freedom of expression, but also furnished King Henry with a potent instrument to eliminate potential threats to his rule. Those who dared oppose his policies or questioned his authority were susceptible to accusations of treason and swift punitive measures. Notable victims of Henry VIII's wrath. Allow us to present a brief overview of some notable figures who fell victim to King Henry's draconian policies. First on the list is Sir Thomas More, a prominent lawyer, writer, and politician who served as the Lord Chancellor of England. More staunchly, refused to recognize Henry as the head of the church and vehemently opposed the annulment of the king's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Consequently, he was charged with high treason and met a tragic end through beheading in 1535. Following More, we encounter John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester and a distinguished Catholic theologian. Fisher's unwavering refusal to acknowledge Henry's primacy over the Church of England, coupled with his vocal dissent against the break with Rome, led to his indictment for high treason. In 1535, Fisher too met the executioner's blade, an outcome shared with Sir Thomas More. Next in line is Thomas Seymour, the brother of Jane Seymour and the uncle of King Edward VI. In 1549, Seymour was executed for treason, primarily for attempting to marry Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth I, without royal permission. The list of individuals ensnared by Henry's treacherous accusations could extend indefinitely, but we shall conclude with one more notable figure. Anne Boleyn, King Henry's second wife, faced charges of adultery, incest, and treason in 1536. These charges, likely fabricated by the king himself, served as a pretext to terminate his marriage to Anne. Consequently, she suffered the same grim fate as More and Fisher, becoming another victim of the Treason Act. It is crucial to acknowledge that hundreds of individuals, many of them wielding significant influence, were either executed or incarcerated as a result of Henry's pervasive paranoia and his unwavering conviction that he was the ultimate authority, both in ecclesiastical and divine matters. Under his reign, the Treason Act of 1534 cast a long, dark shadow over the realm, leading to a climate of fear, suppression of speech, and the ruthless elimination of any opposition to the monarchy's power. The arsenic accidents of Tudor era. Tudor England experienced profound social and economic transformations as an increasing number of individuals relocated from rural areas to urban centers. This transition ushered in a plethora of new environments and technologies, which, while commonplace today, posed perplexing challenges to the people of that era. One such challenge was the use of a toxic substance known as arsenic, often referred to as ratsbane in Tudor England. This compound had diverse applications, ranging from rodent extermination to nefarious means of eliminating unwanted individuals, and even as a purported medicinal remedy. This article will delve into the ubiquity of arsenic in various forms, its inadvertent misuse, and deliberate employment for sinister purposes. During this period, the migration of a growing populace to urban areas naturally led to an increase in the rat population, necessitating the widespread usage of ratsbane. As towns expanded, the prevalence of rats became inevitable, and ratsbane became as much a household staple as tea or flour. Alas, this newfound ubiquity gave rise to tragic accidents as unsuspecting individuals, in their domestic pursuits, mistakenly interchanged ratsbane with edible kitchen ingredients. One poignant anecdote revolves around a housewife named Barbara Gilbert, a resident of Leicestershire, who unknowingly poisoned herself by substituting ratsbane for flour in a meal she was preparing for her family. Such instances of inadvertent poisonings occurred frequently during the Tudor era, as the distinction between deadly toxins and kitchen essentials remained perilously blurred. The era is replete with tales of individuals inadvertently incorporating lethal substances into their meals. For example, a woman once rose in the middle of the night to fetch some beer for her ailing husband. Beer at that time was considered a more sanitary beverage than water. Unfortunately, her fateful choice led her to pick up a container of ratsbane, which she erroneously served to her husband. The consequences in this instance were grave, as her husband's condition deteriorated. Regrettably, not all instances of ratsbane usage were accidental. Some individuals purposefully harnessed its toxic potential to end the lives of others. A notorious case involved Sir Thomas Overbury, a writer and courtier who met his demise in 1613 while incarcerated in the Tower of London. Although technically beyond the Tudor period, Overbury's story traces its roots to this era, making it a relevant narrative for consideration. Overbury's close association with Robert Carr, a favored confidant of King James I, took a turn for the worse when he voiced his disapproval of Carr's proposed marriage to the Countess of Francis Howard. Remarkably, such disapproval could lead to imprisonment during those times. While in prison, Overbury allegedly fell victim to arsenic poisoning, orchestrated by Countess Howard, who sought to safeguard her reputation from potential exposure. Her secrets included salacious affairs and scandals that threatened to unravel her marriage. Initially, Overbury's death was attributed to natural causes. However, upon discovering his body covered in black spots and his organs in a state of putrefaction, it became evident that foul play was afoot. An ensuing investigation unveiled the presence of arsenic in his food and drink. Several of his jailers and their associates faced arrest and execution for their involvement in the conspiracy. Remarkably, Countess Howard managed to evade any repercussions for her role in the plot, highlighting the disparities in justice influenced by one's social standing. The practice of smoking meat. In the Tudor era, the practice of smoking meat was widespread. It was not uncommon to find substantial cuts of bacon, known as flitches, suspended in chimneys for drying and smoking. However, this seemingly routine practice sometimes took a perilous turn, as exemplified by the unfortunate incident involving a woman named Elizabeth Brown. Elizabeth Brown served as a household servant in the residence of a wealthy nobleman. Tragically, she met her demise due to a hazardous mishap. It appears that the rope supporting the bacon within the chimney gave way, causing the weighty flitches to plummet, ultimately crushing her. This calamity unfolded as she sought warmth by the fireside. Brown sustained grave injuries, and despite the earnest efforts of the household to administer medical care, she succumbed to her wounds 4 days later. Several innovations were taking root during the Tudor period, an era renowned for its cultural and historical significance. One such innovation was the advent of clocks. Astonishingly, these timekeeping devices, much like the bacon mentioned earlier, could pose grave dangers. The process of working on clock mechanisms during this time was not without peril, as clock towers were a novel phenomenon, still grappling with the challenges of proper maintenance. In 1513, in the town of Bungay, located in Suffolk, England, a tragic incident unfolded, shedding light on the perils of early clock maintenance. John Townsend, a laborer, found himself in a precarious situation as he endeavored to repair the substantial clock mechanism within the town's church tower. On one fateful day, as he descended from the tower with the cumbersome mechanism in hand, a catastrophic mishap occurred. The mechanism slipped from his grasp and plunged to the ground, albeit not directly. Regrettably, it landed upon the head of a young lad named William Brett before eventually reaching the ground. Despite the desperate attempts of local physicians and surgeons to alleviate his suffering, William Brett passed away the subsequent day, his life claimed by the grievous injuries sustained. This heart-rending occurrence cast a pall of shock and sorrow over the town of Bungay, leaving its residents deeply shaken. It was widely regarded as a tragedy that might have been averted through more cautious practices. Tragically, the incident in Bungay was not an isolated case. As the craft of clockmaking gained popularity and clocks found their way into public spaces, incidents involving falling clock weights and other clock components became increasingly frequent across England. The practice of smoking meat, which involved the curing and flavoring of meat through exposure to smoke, was a commonplace tradition during the Tudor period. In many Tudor households, large bacon cuts, referred to as flitches, were suspended within the chimney for the dual purpose of drying and imparting a smoky flavor to the meat. However, this seemingly innocuous practice could turn perilous, as illustrated by the unfortunate accident involving Elizabeth Brown. Elizabeth Brown was employed as a servant in the household of a prosperous nobleman. Her life took a tragic turn due to an unfortunate incident. It is believed that the rope supporting the bacon in the chimney unexpectedly snapped, causing the heavy flitches to plummet. As Elizabeth Brown sought solace by the hearth, these weighty cuts of meat descended upon her, resulting in a catastrophic crushing incident. The injuries she sustained were severe, and despite the diligent efforts of the household to provide her with medical care, she succumbed to her injuries 4 days later. Intriguingly, during the Tudor era, the development of timekeeping devices, or clocks, was in its nascent stages. Just like bacon could unexpectedly become a source of danger, so too could the process of working on clocks prove perilous. Clock towers were gradually gaining prominence during this period, but akin to any emerging technology, they faced challenges in terms of maintenance and repair. One poignant instance serves to exemplify the hazards associated with early clock maintenance. In 1513, in the town of Bungay, situated in Suffolk, England, a poignant tragedy unfolded. John Townsend, a laborer, was tasked with the repair of the substantial clock mechanism within the town's church tower. On one fateful day, as he descended from the tower, he inadvertently lost his grip on the unwieldy clock mechanism. Tragically, it fell to the ground, although not directly. The mechanism first struck a young boy named William Brett before finally landing on the ground. Despite the earnest efforts of local doctors and surgeons who strove to alleviate the boy's suffering, William Brett succumbed to his injuries on the following day. This heart-wrenching incident left the town of Bungay in a state of shock and sorrow, as it was widely perceived as a tragic accident that might have been prevented through greater caution and meticulous care. Regrettably, the incident in Bungay was not an isolated occurrence. As the craft of clockmaking gained popularity and the installation of clocks in public spaces became more widespread across England, accidents involving falling clock weights and other components became increasingly frequent. Henry VII's madness. If one were to find themselves within the court of King Henry VII during his reign, vigilance would have been imperative. We have just elucidated the consequences he imposed upon Thomas Cromwell for what he deemed a deceitful representation. Nonetheless, a litany of other advisors, nobles, politicians, and clergy also experienced the wrath of Henry over the years. To comprehend why Henry VIII exhibited a penchant for executing individuals, it is necessary to delve into his psyche. To achieve such insight, it is advantageous to explore his health condition. In his youth, Henry was a robust individual. However, this gradually changed throughout his life. Henry had a predilection for jousting, perhaps to an excessive degree, resulting in numerous injuries. These injuries led to chronic pain and mobility impediments, with one leg wound sustained in 1536, never fully convalescing, likely contributing to the development of an ulcer. This ailment caused him considerable distress and hindered his ability to walk or stand for prolonged periods. Much like many individuals, Henry's weight burgeoned as he aged, eventually reaching a considerable magnitude. Some historical accounts posit that his weight neared 400 pounds as he approached the twilight of his life. His extravagant lifestyle, replete with opulent feasts, combined with his diminished physical mobility, undoubtedly contributed to this weight gain. Consequently, his obesity exacerbated an array of health issues, encompassing heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes. Moreover, Henry grappled with a spectrum of mental health concerns, including but not confined to depression, anxiety, and paranoia. Several historians have reasonably correlated these mental health challenges with the physical maladies he endured over his lifetime. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. The Tudor era witnessed a period often referred to as witch mania. Though Catholicism and Protestantism had their moments of taboo, a prevailing consensus, albeit fueled by irrationality, emerged during that time, branding witches as malevolent entities. Throughout the Tudor era, a multitude of women faced accusations and subsequent executions for alleged witchcraft. These witch hunts were predominantly driven by fear, superstition, and mass hysteria, extending their influence to colonies, as exemplified by the Salem witch trials. One particularly peculiar instance was the Witches of Warboys trial in 1593, held in Huntingdonshire, England. 4 women from Warboys were accused of practicing witchcraft and engaging in supernatural acts, including flying on broomsticks and casting spells on livestock. The primary accusers were 2 young girls, Jane Willis and Susan Lathrop, who claimed to have been bewitched by the accused women. These girls alleged that the witches could transform into animals. Despite the fantastical nature of these accusations, the women were convicted and sentenced to death, becoming symbols of the perceived dangers of witchcraft and the necessity of vigilance against supernatural threats. The North Berwick witch trials in Scotland between 1589 and 1591 were another notable episode. Here, a group of women were accused of plotting to assassinate King James VI through witchcraft, with the king directly participating in their investigation and prosecution. This led to the execution of over 70 individuals. The witch hunts of the era were, in part, exacerbated by significant social and economic changes, including monastery closures, the conversion of common land to private property, and the rise of capitalism. These upheavals left many struggling, prompting a search for scapegoats, with witches filling that role. Let us know what you think about what we just showed you. Tudor medicine's dark practices. In the preceding discussion, we have already highlighted the historical usage of arsenic, also known as ratsbane, during the Tudor period. This substance was frequently either unintentionally ingested or deliberately administered to individuals. Interestingly, arsenic, typically employed for exterminating rats and unwanted noblemen, also had its place within the realm of medicine. During the Tudor era, this practice, however peculiar it may sound, encompassed various applications, serving as a topical remedy, an oral medication, and even as a cosmetic. Women of the time often utilized arsenic-based products to achieve a fashionable fair complexion, a preference that gained prevalence during that era. Queen Elizabeth I was notably fond of these products, and there exists a theory suggesting that her demise may have been linked to blood poisoning stemming from a prolonged use of arsenic-laden makeup. Arsenic found its role in the treatment of skin conditions, such as psoriasis and eczema. It was employed either as a topical application in the form of lotions and ointments, or administered orally in minimal quantities. While arsenic was believed to possess anti-inflammatory properties and the capacity to alleviate skin inflammation, it also carried substantial risks, including skin irritations and poisoning. During that period, bloodletting was a conventional medical procedure intended to promote wellness by reducing the volume of blood in the body. Blood could be extracted using different methods, such as a small incision made with a knife or lancet, the use of a cupping glass to create suction, or by allowing leeches to attach to various parts of a patient's skin. This practice was grounded in the belief that it would help restore the balance of the body's humors. The concept of humors dates back to ancient Greece and posited that the body was constituted of 4 essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A person's health was considered optimal when these 4 humors were in equilibrium. In the Tudor era, this notion gained even greater prominence and was widely embraced by physicians and other medical practitioners. According to this theory, diverse factors such as diet, lifestyle, and climate could influence the equilibrium of the senses of humor in the body, potentially leading to illness. For instance, excessive meat consumption was believed to elevate the levels of hot or choleric yellow bile, resulting in fever and inflammation. Regrettably, the practice of bloodletting, along with the focus on humoral balance, often exacerbated the condition of patients, leading to heightened risks of severe and even life-threatening infections and complications. Bloody Mary. In the context of historical practices of bloodletting, a practice that predates the modern cocktail known as a Bloody Mary, it is imperative to delve into the reign of Queen Mary I. Mary, the daughter of King Henry VII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, was renowned for her fervent commitment to Catholicism. Her reign, which spanned a mere 5 years from 1553 to 1558, was marked by determined efforts to reverse the Protestant-leaning policies implemented by her father, King Henry VII. This period witnessed a resurgence of Catholicism and a recalibration of England's religious landscape. During Queen Mary's reign, she abolished several laws favoring Protestantism, which had been enacted during her half-brother Edward VI's short-lived rule. These were replaced with statutes that lent unwavering support to Catholicism. She also sought counsel from Spanish advisors who shared her devout Catholic beliefs, encouraging her in the persecution of Protestants. The vigorous persecution of Protestants under Queen Mary commenced in earnest in 1554 with the enactment of the Heresy Acts, making it unlawful to question Catholic doctrine. Of particular significance was the prohibition on challenging the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation, which asserted that bread and wine transformed into the body and blood of Jesus during the Eucharist. This stance led to the arrest of numerous Protestants who resisted partaking in this ritual, presenting them with a dire choice: conversion to Catholicism or facing the gruesome punishment of being burned alive. One of the most notable incidents during Mary's reign was the execution of the Oxford Martyrs, which included 3 prominent Protestant bishops: Hugh Latimer, Nicholas Ridley, and Thomas Cranmer. Accused of heresy, they were publicly burned at the stake in Oxford in 1555. The execution of these high-profile bishops was intended as a deterrent to other Protestants, serving as a stark reminder that their beliefs would not be tolerated, and England was envisioned as reverting to Catholicism. Throughout Queen Mary's reign, a significant number of Protestants faced execution, with estimates ranging from 280 to over 600 individuals. Many met their tragic end by being burned at the stake, while others were sentenced to the gallows or beheading. A multitude more were imprisoned or compelled to flee the country. It is noteworthy that Mary's persecution of Protestants extended beyond the borders of England. In Ireland, George Browne, the Catholic Archbishop of Dublin, presided over the burning of Protestants in Dublin and other regions. The harsh measures employed by Queen Mary did not garner universal approval within England, leading to widespread unrest and protests. However, her death, believed by many to have been caused by uterine cancer, intervened before any significant upheaval could transpire. Upon her demise, Queen Mary's half-sister, Elizabeth I, ascended to the throne. As a Protestant monarch, Elizabeth promptly reversed most of Mary's religious edicts, restoring Protestantism as the official religion of England instead of Catholicism. The brutal legacy of Richard Topcliffe. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, a significant shift in circumstances unfolded. This era witnessed a continual oscillation between the persecution of Protestants and Catholics, with the latter group finding themselves on the receiving end of grim outcomes. Notably, a fervent anti-Catholic figure during this period was Richard Topcliffe, who was commonly known as the priest hunter. Topcliffe, a member of Parliament, held various governmental positions throughout the years, including that of a Justice of the Peace and the role of a pursuivant, an official tasked with apprehending religious dissidents. He garnered infamy for his severe cruelty and his readiness to employ torture as a means of extracting information from those unfortunate enough to incur his wrath. In the course of Elizabeth's reign, Topcliffe became renowned for his relentless pursuit of Catholic priests, whom he perceived as a menace to the state's stability. His methods of extracting information were diverse and included a gruesome practice known as Topcliffe's persuasion. This technique entailed suspending a prisoner from the ceiling and repeatedly dropping them until they acquiesced to divulging information. Following the extraction of a confession from a Catholic priest or another individual singled out for persecution, Topcliffe would often attend their trial and witness their condemnation to death. He would then personally oversee the execution, ensuring that the full extent of the punishment was carried out. For those convicted of treason, the punishment was particularly brutal, involving hanging until not fully unconscious, followed by drawing and quartering while still alive. Topcliffe took a sinister pleasure in subjecting his prisoners to humiliation before their executions. He would publicly taunt and insult them, compelling them to kneel before him and kiss his hand, employing demeaning tactics. In addition to his hands-on approach, Topcliffe maintained a network of spies who reported on the activities of suspected Catholics. He was unscrupulous in his methods, often resorting to blackmail and other dubious means to achieve his objectives. His legacy is marked by the arrest and execution of numerous Catholic priests and religious figures, including the Jesuit priest Edmund Campion, who endured torture and execution in 1581. How would you rate your ability to adapt to Tudor-era customs and etiquette? Share your thoughts in the comments below.